Cool. Well, it looks like we should be live. Google says we're live. And just want to give just 1 second to confirm. We've got someone out there confirming for us. Hey, Gabe, can you let us know that we are indeed live? Yeah, looks like we're going. Cool. We just want to welcome everyone in today. Really excited to be welcome everyone into the Rainforest Action Network's first live Google Hangout. My name is Brad Shank. I'm the Digital Engagement Director here for the Rainforest Action Network, and part of my charge coming on here is to figure out how we can actually better engage our supporters. And so we put together this really amazing report that's really closing out many years of work in the publishing industry around rainforest free paper. And we really wanted to help dig into, people understand what's in the report, why it's important, and what's going to happen next. And so we have a longtime forest activist with us who's been here and helping wrap up this campaign with the organization, and that's Christy. And she's going to dig in, and she's going to tell us about all of it. But the interactive part is you get to ask questions. So you can ask them live here on the page. Just go ahead and post them in on the page below the stream, any questions you might have, or you can tweet at us. Just tweet your question and put @RAN, @RAN on Twitter. So Christy, go ahead and take it away.
Great. My name is Christy Tenery Spalding, and I'm a forest campaigner here at Rainforest Action Network, and I'm tremendously excited to share this publishing report with you today. As Brad said, it wraps up 4 years of campaigning that RAN has done within the publishing industry, working to move publishers away from using Indonesian fiber and to use responsible fiber to make change on the ground in Indonesia to stop deforestation. And so just to give a little background on the report, it was almost a year ago that we, as an organization, as a campaign, decided to look back at the publishing industry and see what did the implementation of these policies look like, because RAN had seen publishers make numerous policies, and we were curious how the implementation was going and what effect it was having on the ground. So our hypothesis was that if and when fully implemented, these policies would have a tremendous impact on the ground, and that the publishing industry was having this huge positive ripple effect. And so we sent surveys to the top 10 publishers, and we conducted independent fiber tests of 30 books, as we had in 2010 with the initial publisher report. And we engaged with companies and really listened to them to see how implementation was going and where they were going next, essentially. And what came out of that really was a lot of information and a set of best practices that we saw that the publishing industry had innovated. And those best practices formed the core of this report, as you'll see. And this goes back to 2010 when RAN launched its publisher report.
Folks are having a hard time seeing you, and so we're going to fix that up. It's on you, and it looks like our audio hopefully is a little better.
Wonderful. How's that?
Cool, I think we're good to go.
Okay, great. So looking back to 2010, in 2010, RAN released its first report, Turning the Page on Rainforest Destruction, and it really unveiled what we saw as a blind spot in the publishing industry around Indonesian fiber. Publishers were trying to do the right thing, but controversial Indonesian fiber was making its way into the supply chain. And from there, RAN campaigned against Disney and campaigned against the publishing industry as a whole. And in 2012, Disney announced its comprehensive paper policy, which was historic and applies to a mind-boggling 25,000 factories in more than 100 companies. In February of 2013, APP announced its forest conservation policy and the immediate cessation on clearance of high conservation value and high carbon stock forests. And in May of this year, RAND released its most recent publisher report, a new chapter for the publishing industry, as well as new public paper procurement policies from Macmillan and Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. And so at this point, I think maybe I'll pause and we can take a few questions.
Cool. So we're just getting some more viewers on.
Wonderful.
And just a reminder to folks, if you have questions, you can tweet at RAN, so that's just at RAN, or you can just put them below the Hangout here. So just post them in there and say something, and we'll come in and take your questions. So I think you're good on questions for now.
Awesome. So the process for our report was really interesting, and we began with this hypothesis again that the publishing industry was making a difference in the work that it was doing in terms of implementation and its policies, and so we wanted to test this hypothesis. And so in fall of last year, we sent surveys to the top 10 publishers, and in fall of last year, we also independently fiber tested 30 books, 3 from each of the top 10 publishers. And fiber testing is an amazing tool because you can tear the page from a book, send it to a lab, and they'll tell you what species of tree the paper comes from. And so you can track globally and geographically where the paper you're using actually originates. And so in 2010, RAND found that only 5 of 10 publishers had policies. No company was doing its own independent fiber test. And the report that I mentioned earlier, Turning the Page, revealed that 63% of books contain controversial Indonesian fiber in more than trace amounts. And 4 of 30 of those books contained mixed tropical hardwood, which means that there's fiber from natural forests in that paper. And what's amazing is that in 2014, only a third of books contained controversial fiber, which means that there was a 30% reduction in the amount of controversial fiber contained in publishers' books. I'm scrolling down to the fiber testing chart that appears in the report.
And I really encourage folks who are checking us out to really, as we wrap this, we're giving you some of the heart pieces of the report, but we're going to get inside of here some really deep pieces of information if you go and read yourself.
So as I said, 33% of samples in 2014 contained significant percentages of acacia fiber, and only 1 sample this time around contained any significant amount of mixed tropical hardwood fiber. What we now see also is that all 10 companies have paper policies, and 8 out of 10 companies are conducting their own fiber testing, which really shows that when companies take the implementation of their policy seriously and are following up on it, that can make a significant difference in terms of the amount of controversial fiber that's making it into supply chains. And as I mentioned before, we at RAND really saw that publishers were taking strides in terms of not just meeting their own policies, but innovating a set of best practices. And that forms sort of the crux of the report. And those best practices include having a public policy that has ambitious time-bound targets. engaging in transparency and reporting, so issuing an annual report to disclose progress on those targets and other environmental issues that are happening within the company. The implementation of companies' Indonesian forest commitments. This includes eliminating controversial sources and maximizing fiber in contracts, purchase orders, and in communications with supply chain partners. Verification, which includes the independent fiber testing that I mentioned earlier. And the last best practice is outreach, work, and advocacy with printers, mills, vendors, and other supply chain partners. So making sure that the companies themselves are not only taking these policies seriously, but that they're also working with their supply chain partners to drive this demand set up the supply chain. And while we're excited that companies are taking these best practices seriously and being innovative and creative and diligent in monitoring their supply chains, we also recognize that there's still room for improvement within the publishing sector. And that room for improvement section includes keeping paper policies and targets current. We notice that one area where companies sometimes fall behind is that their policies become outdated. And so if targets are only stretched through 2012 or 2014, they need to be updated at this point because that's quite out of date. We notice that companies need to strengthen their transparency and reporting protocols, so making sure that they do issue those annual reports or do some other kind of public reporting on their public policy. We'd like to see companies continue to work with printers, mills, and other supply chain partners, not only to ensure that controversial fiber isn't making it into the supply chain, but we'd like to see those companies also begin to develop and implement their own paper procurement policies. And we believe that publishers have the ear of those companies and could be a great advocate. We'd also like to see all companies institute a robust fiber testing program and develop clear protocols when the tests reveal unwanted fiber. We also believe that companies should avoid solely relying on PREPS, which is an industry grading system for environmentally responsible paper. One cannot rely on a single body to do all of the due diligence when it comes to responsible paper purchasing, and so while PREPS is an excellent organization, we'd also like to see PREPS and its grading system used in concert with other tools. And one of those tools is FSC, or the Forest Stewardship Council, and we would like to see companies continue to or begin to preference FSC when it comes to certification systems instead of giving equal weight to all certification schemes like SFI or PEFC. And so that's what's next for the publishing sector. And perhaps I'll pause again for any questions that are coming in.
Cool. I think you covered a lot of that really well in depth. I think one of the interesting things are the mesh up of the things between PREPS, and we maybe just want to recover what PREPS is, and how that all balances out, how we really know that things are sustainable.
Sure. So PREPS, again, is a coalition of publishers and other groups working to grade paper based on environmental responsibility. And so it looks at the origin of the paper, its content, and develops a grading system, 1, 3, or 5 stars, which applies to every sheet of paper. So when publishers are looking to buy a new sheet, they can look at the PREPS grading system and see, based on their policy, which papers would be most appropriate for them. What we'd like to see publishers do is use PREPS in, as well as other systems like FSC, like fiber basket reporting and customs declarations, as well as independent fiber testing. So there can be a sense of checks and balances where if one system allows controversial fiber to fall through the cracks, something else will catch it. And that is true due diligence when it comes to eliminating controversial sources from the supply chain.
Cool. Well, I just want to remind folks that you can tweet questions to us at RAN, or you can post them down below this stream. And but we'd just love to hear what's next for the campaign. And folks can always add in other questions as they go.
Sure, absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, APP has set a relatively high bar when it comes to its the work that it's currently doing to develop responsible forest management protocols, and they're the largest Indonesian pulp and paper company. And we've seen, I think there was at first quite a bit of wariness when it came to APP, and what we're seeing now is a lot of progress towards what the program hopes to achieve. And what we're looking at next is the second largest pulp and paper company in Indonesia. It's a company called Asia Pacific Resources International Limited, or APRIL. APRIL is connected with natural forest conversion, biodiversity loss, peatland expansion, draining and emissions, climate pollution, and human rights violations, land conflicts with indigenous people. APRIL is also connected with serious legality concerns in Indonesia. And APRIL is also part of a family of companies controlled by Indonesian business tycoon Sukanto Tsunodo, who's connected with palm oil companies, dissolving pulp companies, mining companies, and pulp and paper companies. And Sukanto Tsunodo is connected with all of these companies, all of which have serious issues around transparency, connected with illegal activities, and so looking at APRIL and really digging into to that work, we would really like to see APRIL develop a policy as good or better than APP's, and to implement that policy thoroughly, and to verify that that policy is being implemented. There's a section in the report that pertains to APRIL, and I very much encourage you to read it. As I mentioned, APRIL is connected through Sukanto Tsunodo to this dissolving pulp company. Dissolving pulp is an even higher toxic load type of pulp that's turned into a huge range of household products, and some of it, a large percentage of it, is actually woven into rayon for fabrics. And so we'll certainly be looking at that issue in the coming months.
Cool. And we have a good question here. It's will this impact industries other than publishing? And are there major industries sourcing fiber from the same companies or sources? Something maybe you covered a little bit talking about the dissolving pulp, but you might have some you want to add to it.
Sure. So when I think about this set of best practices, it seems like something that companies other than pulp and paper across forest commodities could look at and use as a set of guideposts for responsible sourcing. So regardless of whether you're in the pulp and paper industry, or whether you're in dissolving pulp, or whether you're in palm oil, it's critically important to track your supply chain, to implement your commitments, to have a public policy with strong targets that are time-bound. And so to me, this set of best practices is something that I hope will be useful for numerous sectors. And remind me of the second part of the question.
Are there other major industries sourcing fiber? And the other part, will this impact industries other than publishing? So will the work from the publishing sector impact other industries? Sure,
I think we've seen that in the APP commitment, publishers sort of leading the way, and there are certainly other industries sourcing paper from Indonesia. The U.S. copy paper market is one of them. packaging, basically anything made out of paper. But U.S. copy paper and packaging would be two industries that would be affected by this, and could also use this set of best practices in order to ensure responsible sourcing.
Cool. Well, that's a great answer. I feel like pretty insightful. A reminder to folks that some folks are still on, and there's a tweet just went out letting other folks know that this is still happening.
Wonderful.
So, so we're not off the hook yet. Reminder to folks who may just be jumping on that you can tweet your questions to us. So just tweet those at RAN, it's at RAN, or put them right below in the Hangout post here. So we'll just give it a minute and see if any more questions come in, or if anyone new jumps on the broadcast. We do just want to take a moment and thank those of you that have been with us throughout the entire broadcast. It's been really exciting to kick this off and take a question. Maybe we'll get a question or two out of this. And just be able to really share with you what's inside of the report and give you a deeper view into the campaign, right? Just so we're not just people sending you an email asking you for a donation or an action, but actually having an in-depth conversation about what this really means.
And I do just want to say, I think this is an important step for RAN because, as Brad mentioned at the beginning, I'm a longtime forest activist. I've been a RAN supporter for many years, and I've supported tons of campaigns where I end up feeling frustrated because a policy is announced and victory is declared and I never hear anything else. So this is part of my urge to give back to the supporters and thank you all and let you know that when we do secure policies with companies, it doesn't end there. We work diligently to ensure that those policies are implemented fully and that that work is translated to impact on the ground for forests and the people who depend on them. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Cool. So one last call out for questions. We can take them both on the Google Plus page or you can tweet them at RAN. And I just want to encourage folks to know that this is going to be the 1st of May. So as this campaign progresses and as we dig into dissolving pulp, which is just creepy, just sounds creepy, right? Like dissolving pulp, like what's going into that? It turns into it's plasticky clothing. It's very strange.
And you know, I heard something recently where the reason why dissolving pulp can't be fiber tested in the same way that paper can is because it's hit with such a high toxic load that it no longer has the tree DNA in it, so you can't tell where it comes from. So it's even harder to track than something like paper, and when it's coming from a place like Indonesia, that points to a real issue. So it is creepy. You're right.
Creepy. Yeah. Well, educational as always. I'm coming in from the digital activist side, and I've learned from folks like Christy and everyone here at the organization about what's really happening, you know, with the forest and with the climate and everything. So we just want to thank everyone who joined today, and thank you, Christy.
Thank you.
So cool. Well, thanks, everyone.
Bye. Take care.